Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Dive into the ocean's mysteries, presented by Michael Crispino. Michael is World Wildlife Fund's Communications Director for the Oceans Goal. Previously, he managed global ocean governance communications at the Pew Charitable Trust, and prior to that, he was the Vice President of Communications and Outreach for the International Seafood Sustainability Foundation. It is such a pleasure to have you with us today, Mike. I'm going to hand things over to you.
Cool, great, thanks so much. And it's really a pleasure to be here too. I do apologize that you can't see my face because my camera is not working at the moment, but the slides do, and the pictures are much better to look at than my face anyway. I am really excited to be here with you all because I love being around nature lovers and enthusiasts, so check that box. I'm outside. I came outside to do this with you all because I figured we love nature and I wanted to show you some green instead of a cold wall inside, but also haven't been able to really travel, only been traveling within the state like a lot of people have. And there are a lot of beautiful places in nature to see, but my heart's really tied to the ocean. Pretty much, it covers 71% of the planet. So if you can stand someplace and see the ocean, that's my favorite place in the world. So I have a lot of favorite places in the world. I wanted to start this off by showing you this picture of a bright red whip coral that's in the Banda Sea in Indonesia, because this is what draws me into the ocean, is that this is a living creature. A living creature, by the way, that humans are doing everything within their power to attempt to destroy, because coral reefs are really under threat, mainly by climate change, but also from pollution and other environmental degradation. But coral reefs are one of those things that until you see one in person, I remember the first time that I went snorkeling in northern Madagascar, and the water was so clear and shallow, and you know, the corals were visible from the boat, right? You didn't even need to get in the water. And to just imagine how long these corals have been around and the reefs have been building, and the important role that they play to coastal communities, you know, and they're also just really beautiful to look at. And there's unicorns in the ocean. So if you are really looking to the ocean as something that is a magical place and inspires creativity and centers your well-being, you know, there are no unicorns on land that I know of that are documented by science, but we have narwhals in the Arctic Ocean. These are really some incredible species. The Arctic, also an ocean region that I absolutely love. The tropical regions are more pleasant temperature-wise to visit, but the Arctic is just spectacular. And that's actually that long tooth. It's basically a tusk. And the thing that's so amazing about the ocean is that there's so much that we still don't know about the ocean. Scientists have so much yet to discover. And just recently, apologies, I don't know if you can hear, I am in Washington. I'm in Washington, D.C., and we get a lot of military helicopters. I apologize, that one was very close. But just recently, in my time at WWF, and I've only been with WWF for about 4 years, scientists have discovered on video narwhals using their tusks to stun fish, to hunt fish. And it was really an amazing, the scientists had suspected that it happened, but then they had it on video, and the world was able to appreciate that. A little bit about me: I am not an ocean expert. I'm a communicator. I started out in the real world after university. I went to Plattsburgh State University in upstate New York for broadcasting and communications, mass media, technically speaking. And I started off in the real world as a broadcast journalist. I worked in New York, Vermont, Michigan, and Washington State for local TV stations. And I came to the ocean conservation community about 12 years ago when I moved to Washington, D.C., and I can actually track my career based on our presidential election cycle. Those are always milestones for me. But it's been 12 years since I've been in DC. I've always been connected to the ocean, right? I think a lot of us have some sort of connection to the ocean. And actually, there's been research done that there's sort of 6 mindsets that people have about the ocean and ways that they connect with it. And whether or not it's a place of wonder and awe-inspiring or a place that centers you and there's a spiritual connection. My connection was my family. We spent summers in New England, Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire. And it was quite spectacular. I grew up in upstate New York, so going to the beach in the summer was just a real break from living amongst the mountains and the trees, which is also beautiful. And I've been really privileged working in ocean conservation to travel to a lot of amazing places and meet the people there. And the people are what drew me into ocean conservation. And as a communicator, I'm going to point out right now that I'm very disappointed in that slide that I messed up the quote there. And hopefully there are a few people chuckling, not a few people groaning. My high school English teacher would be groaning if she saw that. These are the mangroves in the Gulf of Guayaquil in Ecuador. And again, people drew me into ocean conservation because of the connection between people and the ocean. Now, it covers 71% of the planet, but people don't really live there. We live along the coast, but we don't live on the ocean, yet so much of what the ocean provides benefits us, whether we're living in landlocked Oklahoma or on the coast of Ecuador or in the Gulf of Guayaquil. And this was a trip that I took about 2 Julys ago, and it was really an incredible experience. We spent the day in the Gulf of Guayaquil on a remote island where a community only accessible by boat, but this community right there gets access and rights to fish in the mangroves in return for protecting the mangroves. So it's really an incredible sort of outcome of years of dedication to working with local communities and the government to manage effectively resources, have community-based management, and protect what's there while also providing for the people. And there's not a bad seat in the house. The ocean. This was also along the Gulf, along the coast of Ecuador. We traveled from the Gulf of Guayaquil along up the coast, visiting fishing communities and villages, and it really is just a spectacular place to visit and to sort of, reconnect with the ocean. Right near this beach that you're looking at there was a point in that trip to Ecuador where I got a little bit of a stomach bug, and it was the exact day that our team was going out on a dive, and the only real dive of the entire trip. And I had to miss it because I could not be on a boat all day. But like I said, not a bad seat in the house, and we'll get back to that in a second. In the Gulf of Guayaquil, apologies, I really do apologize. Remember this picture. I'm going to show you a view from that beach in just a few slides. But first, I want to talk to you about the community in the Gulf of Guayaquil. They are so connected to the resources that are at hand, and they were so welcoming of us when we went to travel there and learn more. They invited us into the school, into the clinic, and it's a community of a couple hundred people max, and again, only accessible by boat, and those are the boats that you take to get on and off the island. But they wanted to share with us what the ocean shares with them, and that is a bountiful harvest that they are partially responsible for maintaining through local management. So again, further up, if you remember that wonderful shot that I showed you of the coast, I was not feeling well and couldn't go on that dive. But like I said, not a bad seat in the house. I was actually joined by a pod of dolphin who sat with me along the beach because our hotel was right along the beach. So I was able to just, take short walks. They kept me company for multiple hours, just swimming. This was them swimming back and forth, up and down the coast. And if you remember what the coast looked like, there was a bit of a stretch there, but there was a lot of ocean beach, and I just hung out with them all day. And you don't need to be in the ocean to appreciate the ocean, which was something that I learned that day, and got to talk to a bunch of local folks about all of the pods that do travel up and down that coast. This, by the way, is the picture that the crew took while they were out diving and snorkeling and whale watching. They saw a couple whale in addition to the dolphin that they stumbled upon. So they did have a little bit better of a view than I did, but it was still pretty incredible experience both on the shore and out at sea. And one of the reasons why all of this marine life is possible and abundant, and still many species are still recovering from overfishing or numbers driving down. But one of the reasons is because of marine protected areas and community-led efforts that aim to use sustainable tourism and other sustainable sources of income and livelihoods to protect the environment, protect the species, and to protect their livelihoods and their communities. So coral reefs, I'm going to go through a couple of species that just blow my mind. And I told you before about coral reefs, and they blow my mind. They are giant communities, basically, and they're the city centers of our ocean. They have diverse populations of marine species that are living in total in an area that is smaller than the size of California. That's because reefs represent 0.1% of the ocean's surface, but they've been estimated to account for 1/4 of marine biodiversity. So if you could imagine taking a trip, in, let's say, somewhere in, I don't know, in Maine, and seeing 1/4 of Maine's biodiversity just by going to one spot. That would be pretty incredible. And that's what it's like going to a coral reef. And unfortunately, coral reefs are being threatened by climate change and other things. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But I also wanted to show you close up just how spectacular, again, living marine life, but also just the jewels of the ocean. These are acroporic hard corals off the coast of Fiji, I believe that is. And really, when you look at these things close up, it's just incredible to think that these are made by nature. They exist because they have a place in nature. Unfortunately, we're squeezing out those places in much of the world. Manatees, this is a manatee swimming in Florida. They're pretty amazing. Their cousins, the dugongs, are entirely in the marine world and environment, but dugongs are entirely in the marine environment, but manatees do spend some time in freshwater, so they're in amongst the mangroves and where sort of the freshwater intersects with the coastline. And they feed on seagrass. They're herbivores, about 10 feet long, about 1,200 pounds each. They come up for air about every 5 minutes. And again, what I love about the ocean and discovering these things is that they're more closely related to the elephant than they are a lot of other marine creatures. So manatees are incredible. They're closely connected to coastal ecosystems. So maintaining mangroves and seagrass are critical to their survival. And those are two priorities that WWF as a network has as well. And they're just really cool creatures to look at the end of the day. I've actually never gotten to be close up in the water with one, but I have seen a couple in my travels to Florida. Whale sharks. Okay, we just had International Whale Shark Day, and these They're probably in my top 10 marine creatures, because they are just fantastic. They're super slow. They can max out at about 3 whole miles per hour. So they're very, very, very slow sharks, but they're actually the world's largest fish as well. They can grow to be as large as 65 feet long. Um, they're listed as endangered, and they are in trouble in a lot of parts of the world, not only from being caught up as bycatch, but also they get caught up in abandoned and discarded fishing gear, which also contributes to the plastic pollution problem that's flooding our oceans. So there's a lot of work that we have to do to protect whale sharks, but again, whale sharks, they're in all of the tropical waters of the world, the numbers that are still left, and we need to do more to protect them. Uh, but again, that thing travels 3 miles per hour, tops out at 3. For comparison, a mako shark tops out around like 45 miles an hour, just to give you an idea of how slow whale sharks can be. Sea turtles, they swim more gracefully than any human being has ever walked the earth. Let's just be honest. And they've been doing it for 110 million years, which is just incredible to think about. Individual sea turtles can live decades, upwards of 50 years. And there's 7 species, all of them under enormous pressure. One species, which is the leatherback turtle, doesn't have a hard shell like the others, but the others do. And leatherbacks are also the largest sea turtles. They eat anything from seaweed to jellyfish, and that's one of the reasons why plastic pollution is a problem for sea turtles, is because they will often we even have pictures of it, confusing discarded plastic bags floating around the ocean with jellyfish, because if you're a sea turtle, they probably do look very similar. They can migrate thousands and thousands of miles in their lifetime. And again, they are facing the pressures of climate change, unsustainable fishing practices, being caught up as bycatch, but also predation. And there are a lot of onshore and nesting habitat threats as well. But they're beautiful creatures. And again, they have been around for 110 million years. That's just quite amazing. So at the beginning, you heard that I used to work for the International Seafood Sustainability Foundation. And earlier I told you that I was a journalist until 12 years ago when I moved into tuna sustainability. Again, tuna are amazing creatures. I had no idea how amazing they were until I started working on them. To me, I just thought there were tuna fish and they came in a can. But I had no idea there are skipjack, there are also yellowfin and big eye and albacore, and there's Atlantic bluefin and Pacific bluefin and southern bluefin. These fish, they're the torpedoes of the sea. They're highly migratory, and like sea turtles, they swim thousands and thousands of miles, and they're constantly moving. They're also really critical to the international marketplace, which means they're really critical to jobs and livelihoods in lots of coastal communities, but then also lots of communities, lots of countries, developing countries that have large parts of the seafood sector, right? So tuna are representative not only of the challenges that face the ocean, because they are facing challenges from over harvesting and climate change, which is shifting their range. They, used to maybe swim a little bit closer to the equator, and some of them now might be moving further away. Like a lot of fish, they might be looking for a little bit warmer waters. Even just a slight change in the ocean temperature can cause fish to move and look for that temperature that they feel more comfortable at. So tuna fish also represent the opportunities for solving the problems. Because they are such a high profile commodity, there are opportunities for engaging with businesses and the private sector to get them to improve their practices. Because they exist beyond areas of national jurisdiction, countries have to work together to manage these resources. And so in order to effectively manage by the science tuna resources, countries work together, and that requires a lot of diplomacy, but it also requires a lot of science-based information sharing. It requires working together and working across borders to ensure the maintenance of shared stocks. But then there are also the local community components, because local communities and small scale fishermen, also fishers, excuse me, also benefit from access to tuna resources. And again, tuna are part of a larger ecosystem. So people who are fishing tuna species are impacted if other parts of the ecosystem are also driven down at unsustainable rates. So protecting tuna is protecting a marketplace, it's protecting communities, it's protecting livelihoods, and it's also protecting the health of our ocean. Bluefin species are the ones that are in the roughest shape in the Atlantic. It looks like they're coming back, but it's still really too early to tell. Pacific bluefin has been in dire straits for a while as well, and there is lots of movement to protect them. They can migrate from Mexico, which is amazing, all the way over to the coast of Japan in some cases. So they really are amazing fish. And so to understand really what is impacting these amazing ecosystems and amazing species, we have to look at what is driving declines, what is driving the degradation of our ocean, because there are a lot of things, and most of them are caused by humans. This is a picture of a fishing community, again, on the coast of Ecuador. Ecuador was just such a vibrant place that I felt like every picture that we took there was just so spectacular, and we just had to share it. I don't mean to imply that these folks are overfishing, but to give you an idea of how many even just small vessels are fishing off of, you know, one port in one town along the along the coast of Ecuador, I think this picture really does give you some idea of just how many boats and fishers are out there chasing the resources that exist. Overfishing is impacting stocks, not only of fish, but all populations of marine life. It's one of the leading drivers of decline. About 1/3 of the world's fish stocks have already been pushed past their limit. And overfishing, in simple terms, because I'm sure probably if there's a couple hundred of you on this call, at least a couple hundred of you have probably never heard the term overfishing. It sounds pretty self-explanatory, and it is. It's just when fishers take too much of fish too fast. That's when a stock can become overfished if it happens for too long. Something that I learned when I was cutting my teeth in the conservation community on tuna was the difference between overfished and overfishing. It's really incredible that you can have a healthy population that is still being fished too hard and too fast, and you can have an unhealthy population that's actually being fished sustainably at a rate that the population can recover. But the bottom line is we need to do more to curtail unsustainable fishing practices because of the impacts they will undoubtedly have on communities such as this, communities where so many livelihoods and jobs and family security are so connected to the ability to go out and fish on those shared resources. Plastic pollution is an increasingly significant problem for not only the ocean, but marine life and human life. This is a picture that I did not take, but I was there for it. Chris Linders, the photographer, he was quite amazing. He does a lot of stuff in the Arctic, and he also has a really cool book too. Google his name, Chris Linder. He's pretty incredible. But this is my colleague, Dave Applin, and you might have even seen Dave Applin on one of these webinars before. And we were in Port Heiden, Alaska, talking to the community there, community of about 100 people, only accessible by air or boat. You could hike if you wanted to, but it would take you days, I guess. It might not be the safest thing to do. And that's coastal erosion that you're seeing behind him. That should not look like that, but it is. They've actually lost a freshwater lake because of that coastal erosion, and their community had to move inland as well, because where the community used to exist is now pretty much out to sea. But plastic pollution is even showing up in a place like Port Heiden, Alaska, which is on the Alaska Peninsula, on the Bristol Bay side of the Alaska Peninsula. And in a short walk, Dave picked up a ton of plastic. This plastic is, yeah, maybe some of it's coming from the local community, although I don't imagine much. Plastic is showing up everywhere. And judging by all of the other stuff that was washing up on the shore, a lot of that stuff is coming from outside of the bay. It's coming from overseas even, and it's impacting everywhere. There's one dump truck full of plastic waste that's entering our ocean every minute. That's 8 million tons of plastic every year. Just think about that. That impacts marine life, the ecosystems. It impacts us. A lot of that is coming because we are not doing a good job of recapturing the plastic that we put out into the world. And I say we because we all have a role in this, right, as consumers. WWF is working with companies to recapture that and prevent plastic waste from making its way into nature, so that we can realize a future with no plastics in nature. And also working with governments to ensure they're, putting the full weight of laws and regulations behind the need to keep plastic out of nature, and working with activists across the country to really call for a change in how we and our relationship collectively with plastic. And I'm sure that if you've traveled, you have seen the damage that plastic can do in communities that are under-resourced and in waste collection and recycling infrastructure. Also on that trip, we went up a little bit further north in the North Slope borough of Alaska, as far north as you can go in the US. And this is thawing permafrost, that mud that is sort of oozing out of the snow there is permafrost that is thawing and really creating a ton of instability in the land for local communities, making it more difficult for them to go out and meet their subsistence needs. But at the same time, it's also making it much more difficult for scientists and researchers to do their job and to get out in the field and really study not only the impacts of climate change, but the impacts of wildlife distribution changes that impact local communities that depend on subsistence. Alaska is a really magical place, and in just the span of a few villages and a few towns, you can really hear some incredible stories. And I also want to just say that I'm a 40-year-old white guy from upstate New York. I did not grow up in Alaska, and there are a lot of amazing storytellers and knowledge holders in the native and indigenous communities in Alaska that are really worth listening to and really worth digging in to see how we can be more supportive of their needs in a world that is changing much more rapidly than a lot of other parts of the world. The Arctic's warming twice as fast as any other place on Earth. So it's really vital that we do all that we can to help keep communities resilient there. At the end of the day, all of this work comes down to people. People need nature. Nature needs smart, passionate people to help protect the ocean. It's the thing that drew me in, and while the amazingly brilliant coral reefs and species like manatees and bluefin and sea turtles and whale sharks, while they all inspire my creativity, the people who are doing the work on the ground in these places to protect the ocean and all of the life connected to the ocean, those are the people that really inspire my soul and inspire a lot of work, because we just can't do it without people. People are leading to declines in ocean life, and so people are also the ones with the solutions, the power to change things. This is a picture that I took from a trip I took along the coast of Ghana, and consider that 3.1 billion people get a significant amount of protein from seafood. if there's no fish, there's no future. Think about what communities, whether they're in Ecuador, off the coast of Ghana, off the coast of Madagascar, in Southeast Asia, off the coast of Alaska, off the coast of Maine, any of those places. Think about what life would be like without these resources, without fish, without the resources that not only maintain the environment and the ecosystems that people depend on, but also help feed people and provide jobs and food. There's a lot that's worth protecting out there, and a lot that we still have to be doing. But the people really inspire me to use my position. I'm a communicator, but I'm with a really great organization that gives us a lot of leeway to go out there and share these experiences with people, to let them know what is happening in the environment and how our actions, individual actions, can change things. There is a lot that we can do. I mean, we can travel sustainably for sure. Right now, that's a very hard thing to do because we can't travel. We can, travel near to our homes, but we can't really travel to a lot of these places overseas. And even if we could, it might in some ways, depending on that community's infrastructure and resources, it might not be possible for us conservationists to go there, at least in the interim. So taking time to learn more, finding something new about the ocean, something that excites you, and then taking the time to share that with the people who are closest to us, to reconnect with the ocean in a way that maybe we haven't in a while, or maybe we haven't had the space to in a while. And also realizing just how connected our life on land is to what is happening in the ocean. 71% of the Earth's surface, and all of that undiscovered biodiversity even that's out there beneath the water's surface. It's a really incredible thing, and just learning more about that would also give us the tools that we need to take individual actions that together can add up to something really impactful, not only for the ocean and the nature that we all love, but the communities that so closely depend on their connection, and the connection that their ancestors have had for centuries to the ocean and everything it provides. So that is a quick, not quick, I guess. I actually spoke for about 30 minutes, but that's a quick journey through some of the magical things that inspire me about the ocean. There are so many more things to share. And again, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a researcher. I'm a generalist. Communicators, we traffic in knowledge. Knowledge is power. And I'm always learning more. And I'm sure there's stuff that I could even learn from some people on this webinar right now. But with that, I would be very happy to take any questions, if there were any questions about any of this or anything that I might not have mentioned.
Great, thank you so much, Mike. For those watching, if you have a question for our presenters today, you can submit that in the questions field in your control panel. All right, first question for you. Are there any predictions about the amount of single-use plastics being used during COVID and whether or not that will be of concern for the amounts increasing in the ocean?
Yes, absolutely. And I would be doing you a disservice if I tried to quote any real numbers, but it is a very real concern. And it's a concern that WWF has also been engaging with when it comes to the idea of what we do with plastics. There are good uses and needs for plastics when it does come to public health and public safety. There are reasons to use plastic that the benefits outweigh any drawbacks that there might be. But at the end of the day, we don't want plastics in nature, so we need to find a way to keep them out of nature. COVID and the health emergency that has popped up in just about every country in this world is leading to people using more disposables and more single-use plastics. And I think it will be a while before we know the true impact of that. People are already quantifying it, but I think it makes the mission to secure no plastics in nature and make that a reality through international convenings of world leaders, but then also through the private sector, and then also through grassroots movements. all of that will be necessary, and we need to pay particular attention to it now. But I also think we need to be very smart about that. You might remember that when there have been efforts to ban straws, and a lot of those efforts well-intentioned and well-placed, but when the community with the disabled community spoke out and said that they weren't consulted in a lot of these considerations, and that there are folks who have medical needs for straws, and that this was going to be limiting their accessibility to things in life that all people enjoy. There's a need to be smart and intentional about things, and not just call for outright bans on things without fully thinking it through. So I know I'm proud with WWF because we take a realistic approach to this, and going at the areas and the points of leverage where we can really make a difference, and making sure that things are scientifically justified and backed up by the data. And we're going to have to go get that data on what the pandemic did to the plastic pollution problem, because no doubt it has led to an increase.
Mm. And related to that, has there been any effort to work with plastic industries to make more biodegradable plastics?
Sure. So I think working with industry is about looking at the range of solutions that you have to addressing this problem. And I think, you know, I'm not an expert on biodegradables, but I do know that there are offsets. When you choose to do one thing, you could be having negative follow-on consequences that you didn't intend for. So there are certain types of fishing methods that might be better for wildlife, but actually have a higher carbon footprint. So again, WWF is taking a really practical, science-based and data-driven approach to this, which encompasses a range of solutions. So it wouldn't, biodegradables alone wouldn't be the thing that brought us out of the plastic crisis that we're in, but definitely that is part of the solution. So that's a really good question, but I think the takeaway is to think that there is not going to be one solution that is going to get us out of any of the, whether it's the climate crisis, the plastic crisis, or overfishing, any of those things, they're going to need a range of solutions really targeted at the root causes of the problems to really make a difference.
Okay. And someone mentioned in the store seeing omega oils made from krill, and they're just wondering if this approach is endangering the food source of other fish and also potentially polluting the waters.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to any fishing method, so WWF, we work with companies specifically to look at how they are procuring seafood and fish products, and look for the pathways to making that responsible and long-term sustainable. And so krill is one of those things, and there is a very robust debate right now about whether or not we should be fishing the oceans to get fish oil, basically. And that fish oil, not only is it used for, you know, human nutritional supplements, but there is fish meal that we use to fuel aquaculture, fish farming, right? And again, with the plastic crisis, as with the plastic crisis, there is going to be no one single solution. So there are a range of solutions. So while there is likely fishing that is being done to provide fish oil and fish meal, and while that is likely, there are places where that's probably being done well and places where it's not being done well. And so the idea is to look at each individual fishery and look at its footprint on the marine ecosystem, but then also in the local community, and then make those choices from there. And we can use the leverage from the private sector to identify where there are places in their supply chain that they can improve. I will say that fish farming and aquaculture and fish meal are not areas that I've spent a ton of time in. Yes, so take that is my novice answer to that question.
And do you have any tips for the people watching if they would like to buy fish, if they can do that in a sustainable way?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that question is you have to trust where you're buying the fish from, right? We work a lot with large purchasers of seafood, so big retailers, big companies that are buying a lot, because when we work with them, we only have to change their behavior rather than changing the behavior of everybody else along the supply chain who's buying the fish. But consumers actually can do a lot. So one, know where your fish is coming from. So if it's not clearly identified at the fish counter, ask. And if they can't tell you, then you should consider whether or not that is where you want to be buying your fish from. You should know where your fish is coming from, and a seller should be able to tell you that. Increasingly, that idea of traceability, which is basically transparency of data throughout the supply chain, that's becoming a priority for a lot of people who sell fish. So ask questions first. You can also look for eco labels, like the Marine Stewardship Council eco label. It is, the world's leading environmental certification for responsible fishing, and that's definitely something to look at as well, because that means that the fish coming from that fishery has been caught in a way that is the most responsible, and it's also a fishery that is being under constant sort of monitoring, if you will, so that the science is always kept up with, and that the amount of fish that are allowed to be harvested is commensurate with the science. So you can look for that label, you can ask questions, and I think between the two of those, and also, I mean, when you're asking the questions, you can also demand of the people that you buy fish from, maybe not demand, maybe that's a strong word, have a nice conversation with them, but request that they be supplying seafood that they know where it comes from and that's caught using responsible methods from stocks that can afford giving that fish to us. But those are the three things that consumers really can do. And when you are traveling, when that day comes again and we can travel to these places again, really spend some time, go to the fish market, spend some time there, learn from the locals about what's caught. So when you go to the restaurant at night, you can actually you have a better idea if you see something on the menu that was not at the fish market. You can ask, was this flown in? Where did it come from? So yeah, so a little bit of education I think goes a long way, and also demanding a bit more of the fishing community and also seafood producers and retailers as well.
Absolutely. And are you aware of any apps? Like there's one that I and a few viewers are aware of called the Seafood Watch app by the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Do you know of any apps like that where people can just plug in locations and maybe see what's available?
Yeah, I'd say I think that's probably the most comprehensive one that you're going to find in the US. There are some WWF offices overseas that have their own apps as well, but I think that Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch, I think that's a really good tool to have. Again, that tool though is going to be dependent on the person you're buying fish from to know where it came from. You're going to need the right identification, which is why we need the private sector engaged in this with us, why we can't just rely on consumers asking the right questions and demanding the right products, because ultimately that app is not going to be as much use to you if the person who's selling you the fish has absolutely no idea what species it is and where it's coming from. And how it was caught, right? Because fishing methods really do determine environmental sustainability as well.
Hmm. And someone on a totally different note, someone read an article recently about ocean species and their numbers decreasing significantly by the end of the century. And they're just wondering if, since you've started diving, if you've seen a difference in the numbers and diversity of fish in marine life.
Well, I mean, I would have to say, unfortunately, that, I did not really dive or snorkel as a kid. I spent my time on the shore and, in the water a little bit. And it's only been in the last 12 years, and really probably in the last 6 years, that I've been spending any amount of time in the water. But I trust the people around me who tell me that the populations have declined, the reefs are less vibrant, the mangroves aren't standing in places where they once were. I That's definitely that's without a doubt true. And it's not necessarily something that, from my own experience, I'm able to gauge just anecdotally. Um, but I do know that there are definitely places of the world where I have been where there are things that I should have been able to see, or at least I've been told that I haven't been able to. So yeah, and I think look out in the next month or so. I think you'll hear more about the declines of species and populations around the world. Um, that's a little hint and a tease there. Keep an eye out over the next month on WWF. I think there will be some more science that you can dig into there, and some new stats as well.
Great. And we'll end on this last question. Can you talk about one of the more successful WWF projects to save endangered ocean species?
Oh, well, I can talk to you about probably one of the coolest projects I think exists, just because of how low tech it is in some ways. So sea turtles, we talked about those before, and can you still see my screen? I'm just gonna go
Yeah.
back to the sea turtles. So I have a colleague, his name's Mike Osmond, and he has been working with NOAA, the US government, but then also local fishing communities in a couple of places in the world, where they are using LEDs, so lights basically, to keep sea turtles off of fishing hooks. When you use long lines of fishing hooks, it can be attractive to sea turtles, but it has, through this project, they have found that using something as simple as a light can actually reduce the number of sea turtles caught by an incredibly significant number. It could really be a game changer in some of these fisheries for the number of sea turtles that are being caught. And the really cool part is now they're working on making those solar powered LEDs, so that it even further reduces the cost to the fishermen and allows them to deploy this relatively low-tech technique to save sea turtles while also increasing their catch. That's the other interesting part, is that where this has been trialed, fishermen are actually seeing an increase in their catch and a decrease in their catch of turtles. So to me, that's really cool, right? Like, who would have thought that putting a light beneath the water is going to save thousands of sea turtles, right? Like, that's just incredible. And it's happening. And now we need to work to refine it and then scale it up and deploy it. And I think that's what needs to happen with a lot of conservation solutions, is once you find something that works, you need to find the places where you can scale that, and you need to find the resources to develop the capacity to do that. And this is one of those areas that I'm really excited, because I can imagine one day that these LEDs will be on all fishing gear, catching turtles in this way, and saving these populations from further stress. Not that they don't have other things to worry about, but so that's one thing that I've been really excited about. But I think there are others as well. But I don't think that we have time. But if you do go to my final slide, worldwildlife.org, you go to our work in oceans, there's a lot of information there, including information about specific projects that we've been working on. And of course, you can always get in touch with NatHab too if you have any more questions or would like more information. I'm always happy to answer those offline.
Great. That was such an amazing story about the lights. That's fantastic. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mike, for some closing comments since we're running out of time.
Yeah, well, I think my closing comments would be, as everybody says goodbye, one, thank you for spending this time with me. I know that everybody is maxed out for their time. I have a 8-year-old who's homeschooling at home. I get it. And that's where I'm working now. So thanks for spending the time. And then I'd also love to encourage people to just learn more about the communities that are native to a lot of these areas, and the native and indigenous communities that are very closely connected to the ocean, and what they're facing, because what they're facing is an accelerated rate of change and impacts that we're now beginning to face in our towns, in our communities, in our cities. So just take a little bit of time to learn more and appreciate what the ocean provides for people, and the people who are protecting it every day with their actions. And again, thanks so much for joining us. And really, it's really great to spend some time with fellow travelers and nature enthusiasts, and really thankful to NatHab for the opportunity as well. So thank you so much for, thanks for having us.
Well, thank you, Mike. This was really wonderful. And my thanks as well to everyone who tuned in today. Be sure to join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. We did record today's presentation, so we'll have the replay available on our website soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.